Did you get it done?
The Boys is a comic book series written by Irish-American writer Garth Ennis and illustrated by Derek Robertson. It's another one of those dark takes on superheroes that started getting really popular after comic book fans read Alan Moore like once and then The Punisher and completely missed the fucking point. I haven't read the comic books, so we're not here to talk about those today. We're here to talk about the Amazon Prime TV series The Boys, developed for TV by Eric Kripke. As good as The Boys is considered, there are a lot of errors in the ways that it attempts to talk about more serious issues in society, and the way that it handles those issues as it goes about talking about them. And that's what I'm here to talk about now, because I have to complain about something, otherwise the fluid builds up in my brain and my head explodes and I have an aneurysm and die. I want to talk about the way The Boys criticizes American society and politics because it does so in a way that makes it really obvious that this scathing critique of American capitalism and politics was made by one of the most powerful companies on the planet. So, let's go ahead and start getting that done before the nosebleeds start. Hi, this is an ad break because at some point in the video I have to plug my Patreon and stuff, and I might as well do it now than just not at all. If you click the link below and go to my Patreon, you'll find the scripts to my video essays like a week in advance, my own personal writings and poetry, as well as access to 2 entire books that I wrote, since the way I was telling them before was through Amazon, and Amazon is for supervillains. If you do so to my Patreon, thank you. Like literally, thank you, all joking aside. You're the reason that my cat and I are able to eat and stuff, so you're awesome. Now we can get on to the actual parts of the video that you came for. The Boys has a poor track record with addressing racism. The show seeks to present the veneer of talking about these issues, but it skillfully avoids ever addressing the issues or intricacies of the systems that empower the strawmen that it props up. For example, Stormfront. Stormfront's violent, racist murders are extremely hard to watch. For my first criticism of The Boys, it doesn't depict the topic with any real care. They show the audience these horrible, violent acts that are basically lynchings alongside violence that's already staggeringly brutal, but with nothing to set it apart or make it notable to the audience. The show basically uses Nazi Pikachu as a stand-in for racist cops, and in using her as the straw man for this argument, keeps the discussion individualistic. It keeps its depictions of violence as references to other real-life cases, such as Emmett Till, but against the backdrop of all the other violence in the show, and the fact that the word racism isn't even said in relation to Stormfront when they're talking about her hate crimes by her victims. They just feel like more eye-popping sensational fare. Maya Phillips perfectly outlines these feelings in a New York Times article entitled, "My screens are filled with Black Death, but I won't look away." In terms of pure violence, the scenes leading up to the revelation that Stormfront is the racist Liberty are generally in line with the show's more wanton action, but they build to something worthwhile, illuminating how hate can disguise itself, how it can be weaponized, and how it can be inextricably woven into the fabric of a nation. And yet, in setting its gaze on the battered face of the black man killed in front of his little sister, a clear visual reference to the image of the brutalized Emmett Till, the show dips into a dangerous sensationalizing of these tragedies. It borrows from over-traumatized cultural memory and experience. Slavery, lynching, and Jim Crow abuses of the past. Police brutality that continues into the present, and thus produces real pain. Whatever its intention, this gruesome rendering forces black viewers like me to stare at the broken face of someone who looks like them. In that way, it's not much different from videos we see constantly on the news sites and telecasts and social media, of Jacob Blake shot and left paralyzed in Kenosha, Wisconsin, in late August, of George Floyd, who died with his head pressed against the ground, pinned beneath the knee of a police officer in late May, of all the black people we've seen before and since. In a season that addresses racism and hate crimes, none of the black characters really get to talk about racism, despite the show depicting violent and extremely triggering occasions of racially motivated violence, and reveling in the gore of it. Mother's Milk gets to talk about how Vought screwed over his family, but he doesn't actually say the word racism a single time, even though we all know that that's what he's supposed to be talking about, and it weakens the argument. No one really stops to think about how many of the people that Vought has hurt are people of color, women, disabled, or poor. No one even says the word racism in the conversation Mother's Milk has with another black victim of a hate crime, She mentions being afraid to go to the police, but doesn't say why, so the root of the problem, racism, is implied but never fully stated or condemned, and its full scope is never explored. And the reason why is because fully exploring the issue would paint the creators of the show in a negative light they don't want. So instead, they set up strawmen and villains to embody systemic issues so we can be fooled into thinking that the problem can be solved by putting a few bad apples in check. And by the way, when I say creators, I mean like specifically Amazon as the company. I don't know anything about the people who wrote and directed it. I just know the company that let them make it. Now that Storefront is gone, there'll be no more police brutality. Killing Stormfront, if she's even dead, doesn't solve the issue. And while the show isn't explicitly stating that police brutality is the result of just a few bad apples, people who think that will watch it and take that message away from it. Homelander doesn't need to be removed in power, just put in check. Stormfront is a bad cop that just needs to go. Once these two are dealt with, the problem will be over.
Look, the problem is over.
But Stormfront is just a symptom, and none of the people she and Homelander murdered are going to get justice. There's no scene where the black family she destroyed get reconciliation, or the families of the people killed in the racist violence they inspired. The system that made Homelander and Stormfront is still intact. Other heroes are still doing evil. America is still engaging in fascist murder of brown people overseas. The good guys didn't win if Homelander is still living in Vought Tower on a mountain of corpses and corporate money. Yeah, we got a scene of the heroes beating up a Nazi, but what about the rest? Homelander is also a Nazi, and he still has power. It's not a sincere criticism of racism, and that no change happens to the system that allowed these people to come to power in the first place. Instead, they get out-Ubermenched by the nice members of the same corporate regime that's still fucking people over. No one is addressing the fact that Homelander, the guy who's supposed to be like a typical liberal Republican or whatever, got turned into a Nazi like that. Extremely easily. And the scary part is he didn't start doing anything differently. Homelander was still doing basically all of the same shit he was doing before, but now just as a mask-off Nazi. I wonder what that says about our country. I truly have no idea whatsoever. If only someone could make that social commentary. Couldn't be me though. Y'all be easy. The character of Stan Edgar is actually really interesting. He runs Vought, and yeah, he is black, but he still tolerates the insane amounts of racism and all the insane evil shit that the heroes do. If you ask him, he'll say it does bother him, but his main drive is to accrue profit for his pharmaceutical company. And this is what the show never really hits on. Vought is doing everything for profit. Every fucked up thing the heroes do serves them gaining profit. Or maintaining their ability to gain profit, maintaining their ability to have power. It's why Stormfront can storm through cities blasting anyone she wants, why Homelander can slaughter hundreds of people at random. Everything. Vought sells the medications the survivors of their rampages end up needing. They sell the superhuman weapons to the military. They sell Compound V to terrorists. They destroy all these people and then blame it on terrorists so that they can sell more heroes to the military. Vought sets up everything, yet by the end of season 2, basically everyone is content with how things end up. The strawmen are dead until she comes back with her fucking robot limbs, or stuck sadly jerking off on top of a gargoyle like a pathetic and overly enthusiastic Batman cosplayer. The problem is over. And this is the root of the hypocrisy here. The fact that capitalism and corporate profits created spaces for exploitation and abuse, and positions abusers and positions that abusers could flock to in order to gain power and people to oppress. But the show will never have a character explicitly say that. The Boys accurately depicts the kind of world capitalist superheroes would make, but refuses to properly diagnose the issue. It renders all of its messages toothless and performative if you'll address racism, but not capitalism and how it plays a part in the way it creates space for racism, the way it requires it. If you'll address the way that corporations are corrupt and are after nothing but profits, but not the way that the government helps them do that. The thing is, capitalism needs racism to function. The fact that racism against black and brown people in other countries is used to justify the way the military is used to create space for companies that exploit these nations' resources. The way dog whistles to racism are used to convince the public that police departments like LAPD need $3 billion to function. The way that the effects of capitalism in exploitative work environments are most populated and most deadly to people of color, which the last year of global pandemic has proven. Any system that requires exploitation to function will inevitably oppress people of color the hardest. But that knowledge implies the only solution is dismantling those systems, and that means abolishing the companies that rely on them as well. Abolishing the system that made space for an exploitative and abusive company to rise up like that. That's why VOD is so pressed to disavow racism and sexism or whatever, but still allows those things to manifest. If enough of a fuss is made and people actually take action to address racism and such, they'll fall apart. They'd lose most of their main heroes and assets. They'd lose their trademarks and revenue. They'd face legal repercussions. It's the same with Amazon. If they treated their workers better, they'd lose money and time. They'd actually have to punish mistreatment in their company and do something about it. They would have to shake up their operations. They'd lose millions fixing the problem. So they leave it because since its foundation was built on the oppression, they can't keep existing and fix it. But hey, it's okay. The government will get them. The government will make them nice. The government will get those companies in check. Oh boy, thank God for Uncle Sammy. He's gonna beat those bad guys back. The government will stop the company. The government. Yeah. Overall, The Boys is good at diagnosing the problem and casting a great villain to pretend we have to kill to solve the problem. But ultimately, The Boys feels like just another one of those corporate distractions from the issues in our own society going on right now that it's trying to comment on. It says fun things about how companies and celebrities fake caring about issues and, virtue signaling and things like that, about the things that drive corporations and parts of our society. But it never goes as far as it can, and that'll always cripple its power. It addresses fake feminism in media, but then commits the same sins by killing off its female characters for male development. It comments on racism, but it never gets deep into the problem or lets black people actually comment on it other than cases of violence and overt racism when they have to explain their story for the plot. They never talk about the systemic and capitalist ways that racism is kept going. Basically, always take any show that ventures to criticize about social issues with a grain of salt. This has been my TED Talk. Hi, cool. If you made it to this part of the video, thank you for making it to this part of the video. I feel like I'm starting to really hit my creative stride with the type of content that I'm making lately, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. So if you want more of that content, you can find it on my Patreon, and the link is in the description, obviously. And if you go there and subscribe, then you get to be in the credits of the video, like the names that are popping up right now. So yeah, thank you. Have a nice day. Be safe. Wear your mask. And I'll see you in the next one.